Hi, everyone. It's 9:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name, by the way, is Emma Haney. I work as an extension agent for horticulture in Northern Kentucky. And our next presenter is Chris McKenzie, who's going to present on the Toolkit for Crop Protection and Season Extension utilizing the new High Tunnel Resource Guide.
Right. Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah, we're going to talk about a new resource guide that's just come out through a partnership with University of Kentucky and the Kentucky Horticulture Council and the Kentucky Ag Development Fund. So they're getting my slideshow pulled up, so give us just a second here. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you all have high tunnels currently? Okay, great. How many of you all are thinking about getting a high tunnel? All right, good deal. Well, this will be a helpful resource for you all, I think. All right. See, we've got at least one veteran high tunnel grower in the room, so might have to pick on him once in a while. All right. All right. All right. There you go. Okay. I like that dynamic. Throw each other under the bus. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we'll go ahead and dive in here. So my name's Chris McKenzie. I'm the Associate Director of Farm and Food System Collaboration at Grow Appalachia. Grow Appalachia is a program of Berea College. We work in the Appalachian Proud counties of eastern Kentucky, serving farmers out there, mostly with USDA and Kentucky Ag Development Fund dollars. So we're able to do technical assistance for farmers. We have some financial assistance for farmers. And we do get to places like Louisville and Lexington. So if you're not sure whether you qualify for any of those programs, come see us at the table out there. We've got a lot of information out there about our programs. And one of the areas that we focus on pretty heavily is high tunnels, because with high tunnels, you can produce really intensively in a small space, which is really important for the farmers that we work with, both in the mountainous areas of eastern Kentucky, but also in the urban areas of Lexington and Louisville, right? So we can take a small growing space, we can produce high-value crops, we can extend the season to sell those crops at times when we can get the most dollar value out of those, and we can also increase the quality and the quantity of the produce that we harvest out of these tunnels. So, this project, this High Tunnel Toolkit that we're going to talk about today, this High Tunnel Resource Guide, is a collaboration between a lot of different organizations, and I just want to give them a shout out. We've got the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the USDA. Of course, they have their High Tunnel EQIP cost share program. So if you're interested in that, go to their table, or you can come talk to us as well. We worked with the Center for Crop Diversification out of University of Kentucky, which has a huge number of resources related to horticulture. The Kentucky Horticulture Council, which has been a fantastic partner, and the UK's fruit and vegetable crop specialist there on campus. So all of this work has been funded through the Kentucky Ag Development Fund, so we want to give them a shout out. So real quick, I want to make sure that everybody in the room here is on the same page about what is a high tunnel and what's not a high tunnel. So we've got a high tunnel here pictured at the top left corner there. It looks a lot like a greenhouse, and in some ways there's some overlap there. But really with the greenhouse, what we're looking at, the major differences in a high tunnel, you're going to grow in the ground. There's not a lot of active control systems, so there's usually not added heat, though you can add heat to a high tunnel. With a greenhouse, you're almost always going to have a heated system. You're going to have, these big ventilation fans. You're going to be growing usually up on a table or maybe in hanging baskets, so not necessarily growing in the ground. You might grow in a hydroponic system in those. So it's just a little bit more of a passive system when we're talking about a high tunnel. We've also got caterpillar tunnels, which are really a 3-season tunnel. They're not meant to stand up to snow load. And so you're going to kind of put those up and take those down rather than keeping, like a high tunnel, you're going to have up all year round. And of course, we've got low tunnels where we're just using the hoops. You can't necessarily walk in there and work in those. So you do have to kind of uncover your crops every time that you use a low tunnel. But today we're talking about high tunnels, and we created this guide really for new and prospective high tunnel producers, folks who are thinking about getting a high tunnel and working with one. However, I think the final product is going to be useful for even veteran high tunnel growers to really find the most relevant resources. If they find a pest concern or something like that, they can use the high tunnel toolkit to go find the resources they need to answer their questions. The resource guide itself is really designed to be used as a PDF. It's clickable, so all of the table of contents, all through the chapters, there are different links to resources all throughout. So instead of having to go hunt those resources, it kind of guides you through, and you're able to click, and it directs you to the resource, and then you can go back to the place that you held on the PDF. So if you can go to UK's website and download that PDF, that is by far the best way to use that. I do have at least one paper copy here. You see, this is a huge amount of information, but I tell you, only about that first chunk is the resource guide itself. Everything else are the backup resources that we consolidated that you can just use to do a little bit more digging. What this does is that first section here is going to direct you to all of the other resources throughout. So you don't have to read through this at all. It is designed for you to go straight to the resource that you're looking for to answer the question that you need. But it's a lot easier to do that with the PDF. It is 8 chapters, so about 57 pages, the resource guide itself. But there are 92 different resources housed in this guide. So one of the reasons why we decided to pursue this project, high tunnels are uniquely Kentucky. They've been here probably the longest. Dr. Emory Emmert was a Hort professor at University of Kentucky that really pioneered this technology back in the 60s. So these days we've got around 2,000 high tunnels here in Kentucky. That's at the very least. That's just the ones we know that have been installed through the NRCS up to 2021. So there's probably at least 3,000 now at this point. But there's a huge learning curve between producing horticultural crops, fruit and vegetable crops, specialty crops out in an open field versus growing in a high tunnel. There's a lot of things in agriculture that are really just trade-offs, and this is one. There's not a better or worse. There's not a silver bullet here. High tunnels aren't going to fix necessarily all of your problems. They're going to come with their own set of opportunities and challenges. And so this resource guide is really set up to help you all explore those opportunities and challenges and figure out the difference between growing in an open field setting and growing under cover. Now, there is a rapidly growing body of knowledge around high tunnel production. Just in the last, I would say, 10 years, the amount of research, the amount of information that we have coming from the high tunnel community has just exploded. But the problem is all of those resources, all of that information was just scattered all throughout the web, right? It was hard to find things, especially things that pertained specifically to Kentucky and our environment here. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to go through and we wanted to vet resources that were going to be regionally appropriate, easy to understand and use, and contain the latest, most up-to-date information about high tunnels, so that you all aren't working from outdated information or information maybe from different parts of the country that may not be as relevant to the state here. And we wanted to organize that in a way that is easily navigable. So we've got several different ways, and I'll introduce these later, several different ways of interacting with this toolkit, including visual tools, as well as a table of contents and checklists. So there's not one way that you need to interact or interface with this toolkit. It's the way that you feel comfortable, and it's the easiest way for you to find the resources that you need. And in addition to, we've got this printed version here, but a huge number of the resources in this high tunnel toolkit are actually videos. So rather than having to, read through a publication, you can click on the links in the PDF toolkit, and we'll take you to these instructional videos. A lot of them are just very short, very down to the point, very specific about how to do certain things with high tunnels. Some of them are longer webinars, so if you really want to do a deeper dive, there are some 1 hour, 2 hour educational session videos in here. But a lot of them are those short kind of how-to type videos all throughout the toolkit. So when we were thinking about how to design this toolkit, that group I spoke about earlier, this took us 2 years to do. We developed the ideas, we gathered those resources, and we started to vet and organize those resources in terms of, relevance and accuracy and things like that. So we put together a draft. We sent the chapters to reviewers. So we've got reviewers in, I believe, 4 different states at the university level, and also farmers. We had farmer reviewers, we had NRCS agent reviewers, all looking at this thing to make sure that it was going to be, it contained the most relevant information, and that it was usable. So we got that reviewer feedback, and we did a final author revision and formatting, and then 2 years later we finally got this thing published in September of this year through the Center of Crop Diversification. So this resource lives on that website, but because you all are special, I did bring some flash drives for those of you, especially if you don't have access to fast internet or something like that. I wanted to have these on hand so that you could take, there's a PDF version of this on every flash drive here. So feel free to come take these. I don't know if there's quite enough for everybody, but again, this resource lives online, and that's where it's going to be most up to date. So we are going to continually update this resource. So if you do use the flash drives or the paper copy, just keep in mind that that may not be the latest version that you're working with, right? I already spoke about some of the ways that you can interface with this. We've got a high tunnel graphic that shows the inside of a high tunnel with different things like a thermometer. It's actually this graphic here. Well, hopefully there's a slide for that. There we go. So, each section here is labeled, so the water hose over here is irrigation. When you click on irrigation, it takes you to that irrigation section. of the high tunnel toolkit, so you can interface with it that way. We've also got this really robust table of contents. Again, it's clickable, so every section that you see, you can click on it, and it will take you to that specific page. We broke it down into 8 chapters. What is a high tunnel? Why grow in Kentucky in a high tunnel? The economics of the high tunnel, which we specifically put earlier in the chapter, especially because that's important to consider early on when you're doing decision making around, should I get a high tunnel, or how should I use my high tunnel? That economic consideration should be top priority. We've got site selection and construction, high tunnel maintenance, and then the biggest chapter by far is the production side, right? How do I grow in this thing? What type of irrigation do I use? What crops am I going to plant? Those kinds of things. We do have maintaining soil health, which is particularly important for a high tunnel because it's very different managing your soil in a high tunnel versus open field setting. There are some key considerations like salt buildup that can happen in a high tunnel because we don't have rainfall coming and flushing salts out of the soil. And also because the soil stays pretty dry in most cases, sometimes not. There's a lot of tunnels that I've seen that still stay wet because they're not on well-drained soil, right? But organic matter and things like that break down much more slowly in a high tunnel versus in the open field. So managing your soil is a key chapter there. And then, of course, we've got integrated pest management. So that's going to be our bug and insect diseases, or our bug and insect pests, or diseases. Those kinds of things will fall under that. So that's been really helpful to some producers already in terms of, okay, troubleshooting specific problems with their crops in high tunnels. We've also got this handy-dandy little checklist, especially if you're a newer beginning producer or somebody. This is especially useful for somebody who's considering whether they want to implement a high tunnel on their farm. You can go down through this checklist and make sure that you've kind of checked the certain steps that you need to think about before you make decisions in your high tunnel. So, and then each one of these links to a certain chapter or resource in the high tunnel toolkit. So this isn't static. You don't just have to read this and click the boxes. You can click on these different blue highlighted links and it will take you to the information you need to make sure you're covering that specific box. Let's see. So these are just some examples of the chapters and how they're set up. So there is, of course, some text in there to help guide you through the different resources. But we tried to limit the text as much as possible so you're not having to read through too much to access the information that you need. And again, we've got video resources linked in here, so if you're not about reading, click on that video and maybe if you've got your hands full doing something, maybe you're putting tomatoes up in the kitchen, you can click on one of these videos and listen through it while you're working. So, and then throughout the chapter, we've really broken down these different resources and what they are and how to use them and when they come into play, and also giving you kind of an estimate of how long it's going to take to watch the video or look through the resource, so that way you're not guessing, okay, is this going to take me an hour or 2 hours to get through this? So, and again, some of these are going to be PDF or printed resources, and some of them are going to be videos. And we've also got some like Excel or interactive tools as well, like crop budgets, for example. So this toolkit contains a lot of different crop budgets for some of our most high-value, high-tunnel crops like tomatoes and cucumbers and things like that, and where you can take and plug in your own numbers into these budgets and and get the information that you need from those. So there are a lot of interactive resources as well. Another really cool resource that the University of Kentucky's Center for Crop Diversification developed is a high tunnel planting calendar. And those are developed for one of three different regions here in Kentucky. So there's three different calendars for each of these regions. And with that, you can see the different planting dates, the different harvest dates that you might have for certain crops in a high tunnel, because it's completely different than in open field production. So with that resource, I'd say, that's a good starting point. You can, if you're new to high tunnel production, you can take that resource and use it safely to time your crops in the high tunnel. However, I would say that because Center for Crop Diversification was trying to be conservative, you can take that date and start playing around with it, maybe pushing a little back or a little forward. So, in 2 or 3 years, you might be a full week, 2 weeks ahead of that calendar based on your specific farm, your specific environment. All of this information is going to be pretty heavily dependent on the individual factors in your farm. So I encourage you to take this information not as this is exactly how it's going to work on your farm, but as information as a starting point to say, okay, I can start here and be safe and then play around with things as I go and develop my own system, my own production system, my own marketing around my high tunnel. So, and some of these printed resources, I just wanted to give you an example of what we've got in there. This is a 3-page, just really concise resource from Center for Crop Diversification about season extension tools and techniques, right? So, some of these publications are a little bit longer, so you can really do your deep research, but a lot of them really are these short, very accessible publications that have been put out through University of Kentucky, University of Tennessee, Ohio State, a lot of those regional universities that are doing this work so that it's relevant to what we do here in Kentucky. And we've got some of these great videos embedded here as well. All right, so I'm going to stop there and start to kind of think about how you all are using high tunnels and answer some questions. And I'd like to interact with you all as a group and really dig a little bit deeper into, I don't think we have too much time to get into high tunnel production itself, but I would like to talk about this resource, how to use it, and if there are any particular, big high tunnel concerns or opportunities that you all see, we can definitely tackle some of those relevant topics. So, whose wheels are turning in their head? Who's got questions? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, it's on the Center for Crop Diversification's website. So the CCD, the Center for Crop Diversification, if you Google that, it'll pull up their website, and it's housed under their high tunnel resources on that website. So, yeah. Yes, sir. Sure. That is a great question. I am so glad you asked that. So I do wish I had about another hour to answer that question, but I'll answer that question, I think, from my own experience, right? Because tomato production in a high tunnel is how I cut my teeth. That's where I started 20 years ago. And I love growing tomatoes in a high tunnel, and especially versus growing them in an open field. It's a huge game changer. But maybe not as much as I thought, especially from the beginning. At the beginning, you had this kind of honeymoon period where yes, for the first 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, you've got some, it's just above and beyond anything that you can do in the open field with tomatoes. But after a time, especially if we're not rotating our crops, it does start to become a little bit of an arms race, because we've got these pests, we've got these diseases that start to say, hey, this is kind of nice in here. It's warm all winter. I can get set up and really stay. So over time, there is this buildup of pests and diseases, and also soil concerns like the salinity buildup that we talked about. So over time, you do start to experience some of those trade-offs. Diseases that we maybe don't see in the open field, right? Which is why we have to have these high tunnel specific resources so that we know what we're dealing with. And so over time, what I experienced is that, okay, the first couple of years we were able to grow, heirloom, not necessarily disease-resistant varieties in the tunnel just fine. And then we started having issues, so we said, okay, let's grow some disease-resistant, hybrid variety tomatoes that are built, that are designed for growing in a high tunnel, that are, not genetically modified, but selected over time to be high tunnel specific cultivars of tomatoes. And that works for a couple of years, and then, it might be time to start grafting these, right? So there's a technique with tomatoes where you can graft them onto a native rootstock, and it makes them much more hardy, right? But then you've got a whole nother thing that you're having to do at the beginning of the year, which is grow your rootstocks, grow your scions, and then bringing them together in a graft chamber, which is another step, another thing that we've got to think about and do, and it's another expense, it's another cost. And then, okay, we've got this soil-borne disease. We just don't know how to get rid of it. So maybe let's install a hydroponic system where we're growing in bags or in koya, and we're delivering the nutrients through the irrigation system directly instead of growing in the soil. So it's kind of, especially if you don't do crop rotation, it can kind of become this arms race. And that's kind of the point with this guide, is to help you all maybe see what's ahead a little bit, so that you don't have you don't have to make those same mistakes or steer in that direction. There's some things in here that talk about how to do crop rotation in a high tunnel, how to do cover crops in a high tunnel specifically, which high tunnels do change how you're going to manage a cover crop. So that's part of the goal here, is to help you all see ahead a little bit. But yes, I think over time you will start to struggle with specific pests or diseases if you're not doing that crop rotation.
Did you alternate strawberries in the winter and have them come on by spring and then transplant with tomatoes?
I never grew strawberries. I always grew leafy greens was the other thing that I rotated with in my high tunnels, or cut flowers. So that was, and cucumbers, which cucumbers are a cucurbit. They're a different family than your solanaceous crops like your tomatoes or peppers. And so those are some things that you can rotate with. I would say strawberries, yes, as well. University of Tennessee has done some examples with strawberries. Over the years, I haven't seen a huge benefit of growing strawberries in a tunnel versus the open field. Now, that wouldn't necessarily mean you wouldn't do it, because there may be a crop rotation benefit there, but in terms of, I think you can grow strawberries equally as well in the field as you can in a high tunnel in most cases. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What I found, I've done high tunnels when we first introduced it in our CSP program and the CARTIA program.
Yes, sir.
3 tall, I got 2 tall houses the first time.
Yeah.
The maximum size. So I was 3, I had 2 metal and 1 wood.
Yeah.
What I found worked for us, and I'm in Alabama.
Yeah.
But what I found works for us, soil soakers
Yes.
love soil solarization.
Yes, sir.
Really, if you haven't done it, you need to really look at it.
Yeah.
Crop rotation was an element on there.
Yeah.
I've grown everything that you could possibly think of in tunnel houses. Give an example. What did I say to you? Day after Labor Day, I grew 3,000 plants inside of a tunnel house, half of a tunnel house, from bed up until they bolted, which they got me to be as tall as the tunnel house.
Yeah.
Cropping, I produced 6.5 tons of leaves, collard green leaves, and doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to grow pineapples inside of one.
Wow. Amazing. So one thing I want to highlight about what you said, soil solarization, that is a technique for addressing either certain diseases or certain pests like nematodes that build up in high tunnel soils. It's where you lay a clear plastic covering over wet, worked up ground, and it gets really hot in there down to a certain depth.
What I use is chicken wood.
Okay, yeah,
So when we killed it, smoothed it, get it, what we call sloppy wet.
yeah,
And we put it in, and this was in May.
yeah,
We close that tunnel house down, and I don't open it back up until September.
great.
In that time frame. Some farmers they want to go through the whole season, the whole time. You can rotate that over one tunnel house and you can get another.
Yeah,
We also use the pest exclusion system as well.
yeah.
So by putting in we actually use shade cloth.
Shade cloth, yeah,
We can also use the screen. It gets into the large, the small size when you put the 8 instead of doing other things.
right.
And also sometimes if you had crickets, you can trap those inside. But we still have good pollination inside.
Pollination,
Also,
yeah.
say if you can get bumblebees or something like that, and put bumblebees in there.
Yeah, bumblebees, orchard bees. Yeah, there are a number of pollinator hives that you can specifically buy to put in a high tunnel to help with that pollination. So you don't have to hand pollinate. You know, the wind, anything that's wind pollinated doesn't necessarily do that great in a tunnel because it does cut down on a lot of that wind. So you might need some pollinator help.
Opening and closing the tunnel house properly, doing it in whatever months, summer months and things like that. You're gonna do it over the summer because the farmers gonna take advantage of it.
Yeah,
You gotta be out there over the full sun coming.
absolutely.
And the other thing, protocols change. I have farmers that want to go to different protocols. I told them, this is your farm, do what you want to do. But I'm gonna tell you, I told you so. It's not designed for sprinkler, it's not designed for sprinkler systems.
Yeah,
I said, you go ahead or fungicide problem. You use some drip irrigation.
yeah,
Inside, and then we also use the top side of the wood tunnel house. We did hanging baskets. So we had hanging baskets with strawberries.
yeah,
Running down all sides of those, and then we had the downside.
yeah.
I call rotating possible inside.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my final point. The final thing I want you all to take away from this. There are great sources of information about high tunnels out there. Make sure you go to those before you consider or if you're having issues. First step, go to farmers like this gentleman, like these folks over here that are already doing it, that have that experience. That's your first line of defense. Next, go to your county extension agents or folks like Grow Appalachia. I'm training hopefully all of the extension agents on how to use this high tunnel toolkit and how to work with you on this high tunnel toolkit. So we've already had 2 agent trainings, and we're also training NRCS agents as well. So there you go. You've got 2 different organizations now that you can go to that are local to you. But if you're in an Appalachian proud county, you can come to Grow Appalachia, and if you're going to produce, even if you're going to sell $500, we do have to work with commercial farms, but even if you're going to sell $500 worth of vegetables, we can come out to your farm. We can do a customized production plan with you. We can troubleshoot some of these things. We've got some equipment we can help you trial. Like, for example, if you want to try out shade cloth to try to cut the temperatures down in the summer a little bit, we could help you purchase some shade cloth and try it out. And we even have a team that could come out and help install that shade cloth, install drip irrigation, for example, because sometimes these systems, and these high tunnels do require more kind of advanced systems like that drip irrigation. But we do have a team that could come out and install those with you so you can see how it's done. And by the time they leave, you will have done it yourself and you'll know how to do it from then on. So thank you. If you have more questions, come find me. I'll be out at Grow Appalachia's table. And thank you to our farmers who pitched in here. Really appreciate you being willing to share your wisdom and knowledge. Have a wonderful day.
We'll get started again at 10.